Today's reading will be over Beowulf's battle with Grendel. Then the gray-haired treasure giver was glad. The gray-haired treasure giver is Hrothgar, because he's an older king, and he's a king, so he doles out treasure to his thanes. Far famed in battle, the prince of bright Danes and keeper of his people counted on Beowulf, on the warrior's steadfastness and his word. So the laughter started, the din got louder, and the crowd was happy. Welchtheow came in, Hrothgar's queen. Okay, so pause there, new character, Welchtheow, she's Hrothgar's wife, the queen. Observing the courtesies, adorned in her gold, she graciously saluted the men in the hall, then handed the cup first to Hrothgar, their homeland's guardian, urging him to drink deep and enjoy it because he was dear to them. And he drank it down like the warlord he was, with festive cheer. So the helming woman went on her rounds, queenly and dignified, decked out in rings, offering the goblet to all ranks, treating the household and the assembled troop until it was Beowulf's turn to take it from her hand. With measured words she welcomed the gate and thanked God for granting her wish, that a deliverer she could believe in would arrive to ease their afflictions. He accepted the cup, a daunting man, dangerous in action and eager for it always. He addressed Welchtheow. Beowulf, son of Ecgtheow, said, I had a fixed purpose when I put to sea. As I sat in the boat with my band of men, I meant to perform to the uttermost what your people wanted, or perish in the attempt, in the fiend's clutches. And I shall fulfill that purpose, prove myself with a proud deed, or meet my death here in the mead hall. So we meet Welchtheow, and she performs just as a queen should during that time. She is regal, she is queenly. It says that she is dignified. Okay, so she holds herself very well. It also says that she's decked out in rings, so that's just display of Hrothgar's wealth there. This formal boast by Beowulf the Gate pleased the lady well, and she went to sit by Hrothgar, regal and arrayed with gold. Then it was like old times in the echoing hall, proud talk and the people happy, loud and excited, until soon enough Healfdene's heir had to be away to his night's rest. He realized that the demon was going to descend on the hall, that he had plotted all day, from dawnlight until darkness gathered again over the world, and stealthy night shapes came stealing forth under the cloud murk. The company stood as the two leaders took leave of each other. Hrothgar wished Beowulf health and good luck, named him hall warden, and announced as follows. Never since my hand could hold a shield have I entrusted or given control of the Danes' hall to anyone but you. Ward and guard it, for it is the greatest of houses. Be on your mettle now. Keep in mind your fame. Beware of the enemy. There's nothing you wish for that won't be yours if you win through alive. Hrothgar is about to go off to bed, and he tells Beowulf that he's never trusted anyone as much as he trusts Beowulf to take care of Heorot and to defeat Grendel. And Hrothgar also promises him, hey, if you defeat Grendel, anything you want, just name it, and it's yours. Okay. Hrothgar departed then with his house guard. The lord of the Shieldings, their shelter in war, left the mead hall to lie with Welchtheow, his queen and bedmate. The king of glory, as people learned, had posted an outlook who was a match for Grendel, a guard against monsters, special protection to the Danish prince. And the gate placed complete trust in his strength of limb in the lord's favor. He began to remove his iron breastmail, took off the helmet, and handed his attendant the patterned sword, a smith's masterpiece, ordering him to keep the equipment guarded. And before he bedded down, Beowulf, that prince of goodness, proudly asserted, when it comes to fighting, I count myself as dangerous any day as Grendel, so it won't be a cutting edge I'll wield to mow him down, easily as I might. He has no idea of the arts of war, of shield or sword play, although he does possess a wild strength. No weapons, therefore, for either this night. Unarmed, he shall face me if he face me he dares. And may the divine Lord in his wisdom grant the glory of victory to whichever side he sees fit. In the background notes, I did tell you that they oftentimes repeat themselves throughout Beowulf. Because the story was originally told orally over an extended period of time, they have these quick recaps to remind the audience of important events. Here, the audience is reminded that Beowulf has already said that he plans on fighting Grendel hand to hand with no weapons, no sword, no axe, no chainmail to protect him, nothing. So we have that reminder here as everyone is laying down to go to bed before the great battle. Then down the brave man lay with his bolster under his head and his whole company of sea rovers at rest beside him. None of them expected he would ever see his homeland again or get back to his native people and the place who reared him. They knew too well the way it was before, how often the Danes had fallen prey to death in the mead hall. But the Lord was weaving a victory on his war loom for the weather gates. Through the strength of one, they all prevailed. They would crush their enemy and come through in triumph and gladness. The truth is clear. Almighty God rules over mankind and always has. Then out of the night came the shadow stalker, stealthy and swift. The hall guards were slack, asleep at their posts, all except one. It was widely understood that as long as God disallowed it, the fiend could not bear them to his shadowborn. One man, however, was in a fighting mood, awake and on edge, spoiling for action. Side note here, I don't understand how they can all so easily fall asleep when they know Grendel's going to come attack them that night and Beowulf is going to fight him. I guess if you're one of the Danes, you're used to Grendel attacking, so you've just learned to sleep in constant fear. But for the Gates, those 14 warriors that came over with Beowulf, you would think they would stay awake. So I found that kind of odd. But anyways, everyone is asleep now except for Beowulf when Grendel enters into Harrowt Hall. In off the moors, down through the mistbands, God-cursed Grendel came greedily loping. The bane of the race of men roamed forth, hunting for a prey in the high hall. Under the cloud murk he moved towards it until it shone above him, a sheer keep of fortified gold. Nor was that the first time he had scouted the grounds of Hrothgar's dwelling, although never in his life, before or since, did he find harder fortune or hall defenders. Spurned and joyless, he journeyed on ahead and arrived at the bawn. The iron-braced door turned on its hinge when his hands touched it. Then his rage boiled over. He ripped open the mouth of the building, maddening for blood, pacing the length of the patterned floor with his loathsome tread, while a baleful light, flame more than light, flared from his eyes. Okay, if you missed it, in those last two lines there, it's telling us he kind of has flames in his eyes, which lends more towards that demonic idea that we're having of Grendel, right, from this cursed race. He saw many men in the mansion, sleeping, a ranked company of kinsmen and warriors quartered together, and his glee was demonic, picturing the mayhem. Before morning he would rip life from limb and devour them, feed on their flesh. But his fate that night was due to change. His days of ravening had come to an end. Mighty and canny, Hygelac's kinsman was keenly watching, aka Beowulf, because Hygelac is his king, and also a family member. Hygelac's kinsman was keenly watching for the first move the monster would make. Nor did the creature keep him waiting, but struck suddenly and started in. He grabbed and mauled a man on his bench, bit into his bone lappings, bolted down his blood and gorged on him in lumps, leaving the body utterly lifeless, eaten up hand and foot. Venturing closer, his talon was raised to attack Beowulf where he lay on the bed. He was bearing in with open claw when the alert hero's comeback and armlock forestalled him utterly. The captain of evil, ooh, what a great kinning, discovered himself and a hand grip harder than anything he had ever encountered in any man on the face of the earth. Every bone in his body coiled and recoiled, but he could not escape. He was desperate to flee to his den and hide with the devil's litter, for in all his days he had never been clamped or cornered like this. Then Hygelac's trusty retainer recalled his bedtime speech, sprang to his feet and got a firm hold. Fingers were bursting, the monster backtracking, the man overpowering. The dread of the land was desperate to escape, to take a roundabout road and flee to his lair in the fens. The latching power in his fingers weakened. It was the worst trip the terror-mongerer had taken to Harrowt, and now the timbers trembled and sang, a hall session that harrowed every Dane inside the stockade. Stumbling in fury, the two contenders crashed through the building. The hall clattered and hammered, but somehow survived the onslaught and kept standing. It was handsomely structured, a sturdy frame braced with the best of blacksmith's work inside and out. The story goes that as the pair struggled, mead benches were smashed and sprung off the floor, gold fittings and all. Before then, no shielding elder would believe there was any power or person upon earth capable of wrecking their horn-rigged hall, unless the burning embrace of a fire engulfed it in flame. Then an extraordinary wail arose, and bewildering fear came over the Danes. Everyone felt it who heard that cry as it echoed off the wall, a god-cursed scream and strain of catastrophe, the howl of the loser, the lament of the hell-serf keening his wound. He was overwhelmed, manacled tight by the man who of all men was foremost and strongest in the days of this life. So this battle between Grendel and Beowulf is extremely intense. I mean, they're going back and forth all over Harrod Hall. They're completely wrecking and destroying Harrod Hall, and it seems like they're pretty evenly matched. But now towards the end of this paragraph, we find out that Beowulf really gets in there and is overpowering Grendel at this point. But still very evenly matched. So now we're going to keep going back and forth here. But the Earl Troop's leader was not inclined to allow his caller to depart alive. He did not consider that life of much account to anyone anywhere. Time and again, Beowulf's warriors worked to defend their lord's life, laying about them as best they could with their ancestral blades. Stalwart in action, they kept striking out on every side, seeking to cut straight to the soul. When they joined the struggle, there was something they could not have known at the time, that no blade on earth, no blacksmith's art, could ever damage their demon opponent. He had conjured the harm from the cutting edge of every weapon, but his going away out of this world and the days of his life would be agony to him, and his alien spirit would travel far into the fiend's keeping. This battle's a lot more intense than people expected, so those 14 warriors that Beowulf brought with him, they jump in and try to help out with the fight. They've got their axes and their swords, so they start going after Grendel. But when they do this, they discover that weapons do not work on Grendel. It tells us there that he had conjured the harm from the cutting edge of every weapon. In other words, Grendel had put a spell on all weapons, so no weapon could hurt Grendel. How convenient then that earlier in the story, Beowulf announced that he would be fighting Grendel using no weapons, since Grendel himself uses no weapons. That's very convenient for Beowulf that he had already decided not to use a weapon against Grendel. And now we find out that weapons do not work against Grendel. Then he who had harrowed the hearts of men with pain and affliction in former times and had given offense also to God, found that his bodily powers failed him. Hygelac's kinsman kept him helplessly locked in a hand grip. As long as either lived, he was hateful to the other. The monster's whole body was in pain. A tremendous wound appeared on his shoulder. Sinews split and the bone lappings burst. Beowulf was granted the glory of winning. Grendel was driven under the fen banks, fatally hurt, to his desolate lair. His days were numbered. The end of his life was coming over him. He knew it for certain, and one bloody clash had fulfilled the dearest wishes of the Danes. The man who had lately landed among them, proud and sure, had purged the hall, kept it from harm. He was happy with his night work and the courage he had shown. The gate captain had boldly fulfilled his boast to the Danes. He had healed and relieved a huge distress, unremitting humiliations, the hard fate they'd been forced to undergo. No small affliction. Clear proof of this could be seen in the hand the hero displayed high up near the roof. The whole of Grendel's shoulder and arm, his awesome grasp. Beowulf ends up... Let me start over. Beowulf defeats Grendel. And the way he's able to defeat Grendel is he rips Grendel's arm off of Grendel's body. Imagine the strength it would take for someone's arm to come off their body. So he rips Grendel's arm off of Grendel's body, and Grendel flees. Okay, it's a fatal wound. They don't have hospitals back then. Grendel flees and he goes back home. And we have a little bit more of a description of Grendel's home there around line 820-ish. And we'll have a little bit more on the next page as well. So he rips Grendel's arm off. Grendel flees, Beowulf has won the battle. And to show his victory, he hangs Grendel's arm up in Heorot on the wall. So picture someone who is a hunter and how they will hang up the deer heads in their homes. It's the same thing. It's a trophy of battle to show that they vanquished something. Okay, Beowulf hangs Grendel's arm up to show that he vanquished Grendel. Then the morning came, and many a warrior gathered, as I've heard, around the gift hall, clan chiefs flocking from far and near down wide-ranging roads, wondering greatly at the monster's footprints. His fatal departure was regretted by no one who witnessed his trail. The ignominious marks of his flight, where he'd skulked away, exhausted in spirit and beaten in battle, bloodying the path, hauling his doom to the demon's mere. The bloodshot water wallowed and surged. There were loathsome upthrows and overturnings of waves and gore and wound slurry. With his death upon him, he had dived deep into his marsh den, drowned out his life and his heathen soul. Hell claimed him there. Around line 850, we get a little bit more of a description of where Grendel lives. Although we don't get like an insider's view of his actual lair and home, we discover that he lives under the water. His lair is under the water in kind of like this marshy, swampy lake area. So that's where he goes to die. Then away they rode, the old retainers, with many a young man following after, a troop on horseback, in high spirits on their bay steeds. Beowulf's doings were praised over and over again. Nowhere, they said, north or south, between the two seas or under the tall sky, on the broad earth, was there anyone better to raise a shield or to rule a kingdom. Yet there was no laying of blame on their lord, the noble Hrothgar. He was a good king. After Beowulf defeats Grendel, the news of his victory starts spreading around. Okay, all over the land, people learn of the glory of Beowulf. But they still don't blame Hrothgar. Okay, they know Hrothgar was a good king, and he just had this monster, Grendel, that no one but Beowulf could defeat. At times, the warband broke into a gallop, letting their chestnut horses race whenever they found the going good on those well-known tracks. Meanwhile, a thane of the king's household, a carrier of tales, a traditional singer deeply schooled in the lore of the past, linked a new theme to a strict meter. The man started to recite with skill, rehearsing Beowulf's triumphs and feats in well-fashioned lines, entwining his words. So songs start to be sung about Beowulf and his glory. And whenever there's a song in the book, we're going to skip it. So go ahead and skip the italicized portion. And we're going to start in the stanza that begins with "Meanwhile the Danes." Meanwhile the Danes kept racing their mounts down sandy lanes. The light of the day broke and kept brightening. Bands of retainers galloped in excitement to the gabled hall to see the marvel. And the king himself, guardian of the ring hoard, goodness in person, walked in majesty from the queen's quarters with a numerous train, attended by his queen and her crowd of maidens, across to the mead hall. When Hrothgar arrived at the hall, he spoke, standing on the steps under the steep eaves, gazing at the roofwork and Grendel's talon. "First and foremost, let the Almighty Father be thanked for this sight. I suffered a long harrowing by Grendel. But the heavenly shepherd can work his wonders always and everywhere. Not long since, it seemed I would never be granted the slightest solace or relief from any of my burdens. The best of houses glittered and reeked and ran with blood. This one worry outweighed all others, a constant distress to counselors entrusted with defending the people's forts from assault by monsters and demons. But now a man, with the Lord's assistance, has accomplished something none of us could manage before now for all our efforts. Whoever she was who brought forth this flower of manhood, if she is still alive, that woman can say that in her labor the Lord of ages bestowed a grace on her. So now, Beowulf, I adopt you in my heart as a dear son." Aw, that's so sweet. "Nourish and maintain this new connection, you noblest of men. There will be nothing you'll want for, no worldly goods that won't be yours. I've often honored smaller achievements, recognized warriors not nearly as worthy, lavished rewards on the less deserving. But you have made yourself immortal by your glorious action. May the God of ages continue to keep and requite you well." In this long speech, essentially all Hrothgar is doing is thanking Beowulf. "Thank you for saving my people. Thank you for defeating Grendel. I have a lot of gratitude towards you. I see you as a son in my heart. Very sweet. Beowulf, son of Ecgtheow, spoke. We have gone through with a glorious endeavor and been much favored in this fight we dared against the unknown. Nevertheless, if you could have seen the monster himself where he lay beaten, I would have been better pleased. My plan was to pounce, pin him down in a tight grip and grapple him to death. Have him panting for life, powerless, and clasped in my bare hands, his body in thrall. But I couldn't stop him from slipping my hold. The Lord allowed it. My lock on him wasn't strong enough. He struggled fiercely and broke and ran. Yet he bought his freedom at a high price, for he left his hand and arm and shoulder to show he had been here, a cold comfort for having come among us. And now he won't be long for this world. He has done his worst, but the wound will end him. He's hasped and hooped and hurpling with pain, limping and looped in it. Like a man outlawed for wickedness, he must await the mighty judgment of God in majesty. There was less tampering and big talk then from Unferth de Boaster, less of his blather, as the Hall-thanes eyed the awful proof of the hero's prowess, the splayed hand up under the eaves. Every nail, claw scale, and spur, every spike and welt on the hand of that heathen brute was like barbed steel. Everybody said there was no honed iron hard enough to pierce him through, no time-proofed blade that could cut his brutal, blood-caked claw. Then the order was given for all hands to help to refurbish Heorot immediately. Men and women thronging the wine hall, getting it ready. Gold thread shone in the wall hangings, woven scenes that attracted and held the eye's attention. But iron braced as the inside of it had been, that bright room lay in ruins now. The very doors had been dragged from their hinges. Only the roof remained unscathed by the time the guilt-fouled fiend turned tail in despair of his life. But death is not easily escaped from by anyone. All of us with souls, earth dwellers and children of men, must make our way to a destination already ordained where the body, after the banqueting, sleeps on its deathbed. So after thinking Beowulf, the Danes start to put Heorot Hall back together, and it says it was so completely destroyed that only the roof was left untouched. So that just shows the power of that battle that took place between Beowulf and Grendel. It was extremely destructive. So in this stanza, the Danes are putting Heorot Hall back together and rebuilding. Then the due time arrived for Healfdene's son to proceed to the hall. The king himself would sit down to feast. No group ever gathered in greater numbers or better order around their ring-giver. The benches filled with famous men who fell to with relish. Round upon round of mead was passed. Those powerful kinsmen, Hrothgar and Hrothulf, were in high spirits in the raftered hall. Inside Heorot there was nothing but friendship. The shielding nation was not yet familiar with feud and betrayal. Ooh, okay, foreshadowing here. The shielding nation was not yet familiar with feud and betrayal. So right now, everyone's great. Everyone's sitting down. They're all like celebrating what just happened. Okay, but these good times are not going to last forever. And that is where we are going to stop with this reading. Beowulf has defeated Grendel. His arm is hanging up in Heorot Hall, and now the Danes are celebrating. Finally, Grendel's reign of terror has come to an end.